All right, everyone, Shavua Tov. This might be our last Motzaei Shabbos class because you guys are changing the clock. In the United States, we don't change in Eretz Yisrael for another few weeks. They'll be changing it tonight or tomorrow night. Tonight, I think, yes, Saturday night. Times will change. We'll see if we could get a class in to start maybe one or two more weeks after Shabbos, right after Shabbos. The Shabbos will go out close to 8 o'clock in Seattle. All right, so we're going to start, as we always do, with a short story or two of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh. As is the custom to do on Motzaei Shabbos. This is a story of a few years after the passing of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov, we spoke before, we had a story we told before about his famous student, Reb Yechiel Michal of Zlotchev. Make sure I got the right. Hold on, right. Just 1 second. Hold on 1 second, guys. I just think I could have set the Zoom settings wrong. Let me see something here. Oh, yeah, that was the problem. Hold on a second. They made new settings to the Zoom app, and for some reason it didn't set the settings right. Hold on, let's just wait for everyone to get on. Rebecca, welcome. They
Good
changed
luck.
that. They changed the Gedvach. They changed the settings on the Zoom app overnight, I guess, or since my last class. And I thought I set it to the regular setting. It looks like not.
No problem. It's okay. How are things over there? Is everybody safe?
Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem. Okay, let's start again from the beginning of the story. This is after the passing of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh. Thank you for asking, and Shavuot Tov. After the passing of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, we had a story before about his student Rabbi Yechiel Michal of Zlotchev. He was one of the great students of the Baal Shem Tov, and there was another great student of the Baal Shem Tov known as the Toldos Yaakov Yosef. Hey Judith, sorry guys, there's something wrong. It was hard to set up the new settings on this app. I'll have to check it for next time. So the second student, the holy student of Baal Shem Tov, is a person called a famous Rebbe called the Toldos Yaakov Yosef, and Toldos Yaakov Yosef was his sefer, which was called the Toldos, so to say, the children or the life of Yaakov Yosef, and that was his name. He was a big Rav and a great student of the Holy Baal Shem Tov. He was the first author who wrote down the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. So his publication was the first publication of the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. And so Rabbi Zlotchev, or hello, Reb Shimon, apologize again for the mess up on the Zoom. So Rabbi Zlotchev had a son called Reb Yosef. This is after the passing of the Baal Shem Tov, and after the publication of the book of the Toldos Yaakov Yosef. And Reb Yosef becomes Reb Yosef, hey Barbara, the son of Rabbi Chol Zlotchev. His name was Yosef as well, and he became very sick, and mamish almost deathly sick. And his father, of course, was very concerned about his health. And then the message comes in from I guess one of the cities that they were planning to the non-Chasidim, those who were opponents to the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, were going to burn the book of the Toldos, which is the generations of Yaakov Yosef, which again were the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, the first publication of Chassidus, and they were going to burn the Sefer, the Toldos Yaakov Yosef. The Toldos Yaakov Yosef, Ramchal Zlotchev, these were all the colleagues and friends of the Maggid Mizrich, who later became the successor of the Baal Shem Tov. And this is again after the passing of the Baal Shem Tov. So when Ramchal Zlotchev, the holy Ramchal Zlotchev, who made the famous song about Tshuva, the song that they sang around the bed of the Baal Shem Tov while he passed away on Shavuos. So, and the Baal Shem Tov said, whoever sings the Ramchal Zlotchev's song, I will come and advocate for that person in their situation of tshuva for what they need. So we're talking about a tremendous tzaddik, Ramchal Zlotchev. So he hears that they're about to burn the sefer of the Toldos Yaakov Yosef. He gets so worked up. He says he has to go try to work and try to annul the decree, to annul whatever they're doing. So he has to leave his son, but his son was mamish deathly. So he told his family, he said, listen, if God forbid my son Yosef passes away, while I'm gone, don't bury him until I come back. And he leaves. And right after he leaves, this Rabbi Yosef, his son of Ramchal Zlotchev, we have to imagine was also a great person, goes into a kind of a deep coma, so much so that they thought he passed away. So maybe he's having like an out of body experience, and he's like this motionless, and they don't bury him because the father said not to bury. And he's lying there motionless for a few days, and then a sweat breaks out, and he kind of comes back to life. And he says that while he was in his deep coma, he had this dream. We had this vision where he does, as the soul does after it passes away, goes up to heaven, and he goes to the heavenly court. And as happens in everyone's case and in the heavenly court, there's different angels, the adversaries, and then there's the lawyers that are advocating for the soul, for the person. And each one carries with them all their books of good deeds or less good deeds or bad deeds of a person's life. And kind of they go through the math and they see what the verdict should be. So the prosecuting angel comes with this huge, thick, heavy book. He's schlepping it. He could barely carry it. He's like limping into the court case. It's such a large book of Averos. This is his story. This is how he tells the story. And then comes in the angel that's his supposed to advocate for him. The angel walks in with a little tiny thin book of his mitzvahs, of his good deeds. So he knows the situation isn't good. And so they start really checking through all his averos, all his sins, transgressions, and hearing all his mitzvahs. And they're about to give a verdict. And then comes the third angel. Now, the third angel comes in, and he carries with him the book of Yisurim, of suffering the person went through. And suffering is a way of cleansing and atonement for the sins. So we have a third book we have to examine to see how the book of Yisurim, of suffering, has affected the transgressions and maybe made it less severe. So after going through all the math, the conclusion still was that there were still too many transgressions to overlook, and the verdict had to be that he would be sentenced to death. As that's about to happen, all of a sudden there's a big tumult in heaven, in the court. And all of a sudden storms into the court case. His father, Ramchal Zlotchev, storms in. And his father sees him standing there. He says, Yosef, what are you doing here? He says, Father, I'm an out-of-body experience, and I'm sitting here in court, and they want to sentence me to death. You need to help me. He goes, sure, I'll help you. But if he runs into the court and he says, what's going on? They're about to burn the sefer of the Toldos Yaakov Yosef. They're about to burn the sefer of Chassidus. How are you allowing this? And he said, sorry. The court said, in every system, there's levels of courts. This is just a low-level court. You have to go to the Supreme Court up in the Mamish, the Sanhedrin Agadol in Shemayim. There they deal with such big issues like burning a sefer of Chassidus. I can't help you. And he leaves, and he forgets about his son Yosef. And then, he doesn't address the issue. And all of a sudden, they're about to get back to the case, and there's another storm. And in comes the Toldos Yaakov Yosef himself, the author of the sefer. And he says, Yosef, he turns to his friend's son, Yosef of Zlotchev. He says, what are you doing here? He says, Holy Rebbe, they want to sentence me to death. You have to help me. So he says, sure, of course I can help you. And he walks in, he says, what's going on? They're about to burn my sefer. They told us called Yaakov Yosef. He starts talking about his sefer. And the court says the same thing. Sorry, the Rebbe, This is a big issue. It's not for our small court. You have to go up to the upper courts and there discuss your issue about this burning of the Talmud. All of a sudden, they're about to start the third the third time they're trying to get back to the case, and all of a sudden there's an announcement: make way, everyone open. The holy Baal Shem Tov has come. So immediately everyone stops, everyone gets up. The Baal Shem Tov is about to walk into the court, and he says, Yosef, what are you doing here? He says, Holy Rabbi, please, my father was here, the Toldus was here. No one's helping me. They're about to sentence me to death. So he said, no, that can't be. Baal Shem Tov came in and he walked in and he advocated for Yosef. And the ruling was changed, reversed, and they sent him back. So he said, he was up in heaven. He saw there was a big balagan, they say in Hebrew, balagan. There was a lot going on. Heaven it wasn't a regular night in heaven. The Baal Shem Tov was storming in, the Toldus was storming in, and Mechaz Lodge was storming in. He wanted to see what would happen. So he said to the angels, you know what, before you take me back, I just want to hang around a bit more so I could see what's going on. So they said, no, it doesn't work like that. The sentencing was passed, you have to go back to your body. So they bring him back and he sees his body lying there. He said, I saw my body motionless, and I was wondering to myself, what was I pushing to come back for this? He says, here's a body full of challenges, full of needs, full of desires. Here I was in heaven with the Baal Shem Tov, Mechaz Lodge. I was in a holy place. Why was I fighting so hard to get back to this world? So sorry, Ariel, about the confusion with the link.
No,
So
it's
he,
okay.
but he said I had to come back into my body. The angel said, doesn't work like that. Once there's a ruling, there's a ruling. And here I'm up now, and he said this story. And that's the story tonight. And the story tonight is, I guess, the lesson is it's hard to understand clearly, but it's a beautiful story. Just of sometimes we don't understand everything that's happening. But the Baal Shem Tov was always, we know that he made a special tefillah, a special prayer that he davened. That even though this happened after he passed away, but he davened that we have what's called aliyas neshama, when you have an elevation of the soul, which was what was happening over here, right? Mechaz Lachiv was still alive, and the Toldi Yaakov Yosef was still alive, but he has what's called aliyas neshama. The soul is able to go up into the higher worlds. So what happens is, you see, when you go up to higher worlds, it's hard to focus on certain things that you should be focusing on in this world. And the Baal Shem Tov made a special prayer that he should never lose focus, even when he has aliyas neshama. Even when he goes up, he should be able to focus and answer and communicate with people who are in this world with their needs according to their needs in this world, because the needs of what we have in this world doesn't always match the needs of how the bigger perspective is from the higher worlds. So the Baal Shem Tov, even after he passed away, about to burn the first Sefer Chassidus, he sees a Jew needs a favor, a Jew needs his help. He doesn't focus on the burning of the Chassidus. He doesn't focus on the burning of the Sefer. Sefers, he could always write again. You could always burn it. Another sefer could be published. The teachings are ideas that could be passed on in another way. But a person's life, a person's well-being, that's something you have to focus on right now. And sometimes that even overrides the needs of spiritual importance, like saving the book of the Talmud Yaakov Yosef. So that's that wonderful story. And now, Merz Hashem, we're going to go to the Halacha class. Hold on, let's bring up the text. Here we go. We changed everything around. All right, we're holding in the middle of the laws of tefillah. We're not holding Aleph, we're holding Yud, I think. Sorry, Tes. Okay, we're holding the laws of tefillah. Again, when we say the laws of tefillah, we're talking about, we've already learned the laws up until Shemoneh Esrei, which is the laws of Shemoneh Esrei, the Amidah, the silent prayer. So they're talking about what can and we cannot do, and how does one daven the silent prayer. So law number 9, the Kitzur writes like this about how you should behave during the prayer time. Lo yigahek v'lo yifahek, which is you shouldn't belch or yawn. Sometimes like what we call burping. That sometimes has a bad smell of what the food you've eaten. Okay, so he says basically that it doesn't translate in English, but it's understood. We shouldn't be burping and we shouldn't be yawning during the Shemoneh Esrei. But what happens if it's not always is it in your control? If you can't help yourself, so you have to make sure that behave properly, which is yaniach yadav apiv. Don't just yawn, a large yawn or burp or something like that, which is not modest while you're davening Shemoneh Esrei. If you can't control yourself, cover your mouth. You shouldn't show your opening of your mouth. By covering your mouth, you're blocking it. One shouldn't spit while you're davening the Shemoneh Esrei. Let's say you have phlegm in your mouth, and it's really annoying you and bothering you. So till it disturbs and affects your ability to pray. So you should remove it by moving. So first he says you should try to spit it into a napkin or a clothing, something. If that's disgusting to you to do that, and you want to just spit it out on the floor, not sure why that would be better. Turn to your left first and try to spit behind you, not in front of you, so you shouldn't be looking at it, to your left. And if you can't lean all the way to behind you for whatever reason, it could be various reasons why you can't. So maybe someone's standing behind you, who knows? So then Yarik l'smaile, then do it to your left. Again, you should be considerate to other people. When he says that, when the Kitzur says better to spit it into a napkin or a beged, and the reason you don't want to do it is because it doesn't work for you. Hey, Aaron, so I'm just putting on mute. It doesn't work for you, but nevertheless, yeah, if you're going to spit in front of other people, and that's also, you have to take that into very strong consideration. So, but if you can't spit behind you, spit to your left. So first we try to spit to our left. If we can't spit to our left, we spit to our right. We know the right is always more the holy side. In the godly side, God stands on the person's right side. So you should spit to the right. And what happens if a mosquito or a lice, something's bothering you, an insect, is yimashmesh begadav lasira, kind of try to shake your clothing that it should fall off. Because again, what we're discussing over here is okay, just try to step a second back. Imagine you are standing in front of a very super important person. Today we don't have the example of a king the way it once was. It says that there was a chassid, a big chassid of I guess the Rebbe Rashab, that when the Tsar fell, he was very upset. So they asked him, why are you so upset? So he says, what do you mean? The Tsar was an example of malchus. He needed to know, what does it mean, the definition of God's king? So he always looked at the Tsar as an example, because the Tsar was very God-fearing. Now there's no such thing as a Tsar anymore. So he wouldn't have, what's going to be the example of malchus? Yes, Aaron.
My question is, okay, I'm bringing this up. We've talked about it, so in the past, I don't need the whole thing. We're not going to argue,
yeah.
But we're not going to argue about the whole thing because that's not important. But you as Chabad people, I've seen they spit. So it's another prayer. I understand that. But you said, I'm just using this. You said, if you have to, spit behind you. But and the other spit, you can still see it during this prayer. And so what do you do?
Okay, let me explain. There's two differences over here. One, over here, we're talking about a person who has gathered spit in their mouth, which usually is a little bit more exaggerated if you're going to spit it out than a small little spit that we do during the Aleinu, and our feet are not together, and we right immediately supposed to cover it. Again, we're not going to go into the whole discussion about this. We discussed the Aleinu many times, and when we get there, we'll discuss it more in the laws of tefillah. But over there, when we spit in Aleinu, one has to also spit. If you ever watch the Rebbe, in the videos, the Rebbe made it with his hand, a very small amount, and you right away rub it with your foot. Here we're talking about Shemoneh Esrei, where you're not going to be able to rub it with your foot because you're not allowed to move your feet. And usually we're talking about phlegm, which is a little bit more inappropriate, let's say, in a shul setting, than just a small little amount of spit. So therefore, it's not exactly the same thing. I hear what you're saying, and I know that you guys have had issue with Leinu spitting, but this is something, here we're talking about also not so much about the environment of the shul, but of how you're supposed to position yourself when you stand in front of a king. So you should just like imagine if you're standing in front of a king. Shemoneh Esrei is the time your mom is standing in front of the king. If you're standing in front of a king, you wouldn't be belching and you wouldn't be yawning. It would be really inappropriate, right? And you wouldn't be spitting and you wouldn't be, focusing on bugs on you, right? Because it says if standing in front of a king, any movement is a movement of Meridim and Malchus, someone who's going against the king. So one has to be very careful how we do things in Shemoneh Esrei. It's not so much about the shul environment, which I'm saying we have to be sensitive as well. But here we're talking about mostly the focus of how you're supposed to present yourself in front of the king. Now, there's a famous story we're talking about. It's Motzaei Shabbos, but allow ourselves a little more stories. The famous story of the Gaon, Bustanai. Everyone knows the story of Bustanai, who was raised by the king, the Persian king, a story that's connected to our times. And he ended up becoming one of the Gaonim, one of the, not the Gaonim, Gaonim, but also mainly the Rosh Galuta. He was from the family of the Rosh Galuta around the time of 700, I forget the exact year, maybe 600 from the Common Era. And so he was standing in front of the king, and a mosquito came and bit him. And he didn't move. And the king was so impressed. He says, when you're in front of a king, you don't move. I learned. And that his symbol, his emblem was a mosquito, because he showed that he wouldn't even let a mosquito distract his standing in front of a king in a way of appropriate, honorable manner. So he didn't even push off the mosquito. So therefore, he's saying when you're standing in front of the king, and here you have a kina, a ktsasa, you're getting bitten by a lice or some sort of insect. So he says, Yemashmish begadav lasirav, you're allowed to kind of shake your garment. Shloi tisbata kavanase, in a way that won't distract, so the bug won't distract your concentration, because then it affects your ability to pray. Avloi yasira biyada, but you can't take the mosquito or the insect with your hand itself and pull it off. You could just like shake your sweater or something, or your jacket, whatever, or your pants. As even nishma tatas mi olive, so too. Let's say your talis starts to fall off. You would happen sometimes. Men know that when you're davening, the talis could sometimes start slipping off. You could put it back if most of it fell off, even. If the whole talis falls off, then you can't just kind of bend down or catch it and put it on totally, because then that's considered a distraction, a separation in the tefillah itself. What happens if the book falls down in front of you? And then you're going to distract your ability to daven and concentrate. So you have to wait till you complete the bracha again. This is in the case that you're able to continue davening by heart. If you don't know the words and you have to look inside, then of course there's no point. There's nothing for you to wait for. So then you would pick it up. But if you know how to daven by heart and you can pronounce the words properly, so get to the end of the bracha, and in between the blessings, it's like kind of 1 second, Hashem, and bend down and get your siddur. Yes, Rebecca.
What if like something happens and you don't mean to move your feet, but you move your feet? Do you need to start all over again?
No, we're not talking about enough. You move your feet a bit, you don't have to start over again. But that's and also we're gonna have situations where when are you allowed to kind of make any kind of movement at all? But no, if by mistake you just move your feet a bit, that's not a problem. Hold on, let me just finish the law. Just give me a second. If his book falls down, then you could pick it up again. It's repeating myself between the blessings. If you could pray it by heart. He says, "V'chol advar masur mitoich tefillas Shemoneh Esrei, asurim ad la'achar sheyifsa hapsiois." How long does this last? All these rules of standing focus means Shemoneh Esrei is the most important tefillah with the most strict laws of how you're allowed to do anything that's disrespectful, distracting. Again, imagine you're standing in front of a king. It's harder for us to understand this today, where a king has the ability to pass law on you for any kind of distraction or show of disrespect. How long does this last? Until you walk backwards. Walking forward and walking backwards at the beginning and end of the tefillah is how you're basically positioning yourself to the way you're standing before the king. So just like you walk forward, you're standing before the king. When you finish talking to the king, you walk backwards. And then that kind of severity of positioning of the tefillah is not as severe as it was before you step backwards. Yes, Aaron.
Okay. So I've heard this from many people, because of the way you have to look, the way you have to act. So, and I thought of this many times. The whole time you're praying, you're in front of the king. So what's this? You're saying like you're in front of the king, but other prayers you didn't say that. Even if you're sitting for the Shema, you're still in front of the king.
No, yes, but it's a different kind of it's a different you may not see it like the way, but that is the way it is. That's what the Shemoneh Esrei is literally like the time where you kind of there's different ways of communicating. Hashem has different ways of communicating. The communicating the Shemoneh Esrei is as if you're walking into the king sitting on his throne. It is like that, sitting on his throne. Why is it like that by kings in this world? Because it's like that by Hashem. So when you're standing this Shemoneh Esrei, that's when you're actually walking into the chamber, standing in front of the king, and that's why you take the steps backwards and forwards to position yourself. You stand in front of the king, and when you finish that, like you would be finished your discussion with the kings, you walk backwards, and that completes that session. And the continuing the davening is a different kind of prayer where Hashem is with you, but it's not the same level. Because the actual Shemoneh Esrei is the place where you're actually asking for things. Before that, you're describing the greatness of Hashem. The real focus of the point of the Shemoneh Esrei is building up yourself to the point of Yahavta, which we say in the Shema, is the love for Hashem. So that's kind of working within yourself, the tefillah. Of course, God is listening to your prayers. But the tefillah, the idea of the tefillah up until that point is building up within yourself the Kabbalah Sol Malchus Shemayim, accepting God as king, and to build your love for Hashem. And then when you accept God as king and you're standing in front of him in that position, so it's a process. So the process of tefillah is the part where you're standing in front of the king is the Shemoneh Esrei. And therefore, we're very strict in your movements and behaviors and yawnings, etc. Again, yawning with your mouth open shouldn't be something you shouldn't do ever, but especially if you're standing Shemoneh Esrei. Like he says over here in the footnote, some say that when he says yigahek, it doesn't mean yawning as much as it means stretching. So whatever. That's again, these are things that you're doing that are disrespectful. It's a disregard. You wouldn't do it if you're standing in front of a king. Surely you shouldn't do it in front of Hashem. Does that answer your question, Aaron?
Yeah, you're basically saying that there's different moments. You're always with the king, but at this point he moved to his what do you want to call it? The chair.
Yeah, the throne. But I'm saying it's not just that. It's also there's the focus. The first part of the davening up until the Shemoneh Esrei is building up within yourself. I mean, if you think about it, it's kind of you're the whole story. You're when you accept God as king, it actualizes that relationship between you and him. And that moment then he's sitting on the throne as the king. So the first part of the tefillah is to build up of Kabbalah Sol Malchus Shemayim and V'Havta, to accept God as king and to love Hashem. The whole part of davening, we learned this many times, is to be able to say Shema Yisrael. The reason why they have Psukei de Zimra and they have the brachas before Krishma is that when you say Shema and you say V'Havta, I love God, you mean it to the best that you can. Yes, Rebecca.
I just wanted to comment that also the reason for some of these halachos might be that it's a silent prayer. Like the room is supposed to be silent so that everybody can dive into themselves and concentrate. So probably the reason for some of these halachos is like to minimize distractions to other people.
That's a consideration, but the focus mainly over here is you vis-a-vis Hashem.
Mhm.
But that also is included. It is distracting. That's why, for instance, if you're in a shul and for whatever reason you're not davening the Shemoneh Esrei with the minyan, or you finish early, or you're behind, what have you, to absolutely be quiet and not be distracted. It's very distracting. And we're not even talking about talking on the phone or talking to your next person, but we're including into that even davening loudly. Yes.
Do you, if you're behind and you're catching up, do you need to stand just because they're saying Shemoneh Esrei?
It's an excellent question. I think that we're going to possibly get to that. It's better if you can. The reason is because we learned before by Shema that when the community is doing something, but you have to show that you're part of that and you don't disregard what they're doing. So if you're holding a different part of the davening, you say Shema with everyone to not give off the impression that maybe you don't agree with the statement Shema. So too, if you're sitting while everyone is standing, so you're kind of disrespecting or showing maybe you don't follow along with the customs.
But do you have to
Yeah,
sit
but
for Shema?
we learned there's different halachas. We learned that you don't have to sit or stand, but you should definitely not do either one right before Shema. If you're sitting, to stay seated, and you should definitely not stand up, especially to say the Shema. No.
Okay.
Okay. Footnote. Let's just finish off with footnote number 30. What are we talking about over here? We're talking about it. You may not enwrap yourself in it because it's considered an interruption, which would be if the talus totally falls off. But if it disturbs your concentration to be without a talus, you may place it on your shoulders. Okay, so same idea. the main thing that we're trying to do over here is keep focus and kavana. But if the kavana is being disrupted because your talis is on the floor and you can't pray properly, so again, it's counterproductive, and therefore you should put it over your shoulders so you're in a position where you could daven freely. All right, everyone. Again, I have to figure out now what's the situation with the new app. Make sure I don't do the settings incorrectly tomorrow morning. Laila Tov, everyone. Shavua Tov. Have a wonderful, safe week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
About this class, we have to see how we're going to go forward because you changed the clock tonight, if I'm not mistaken.
Hmm.
Tomorrow, next week, if I'm not mistaken, Motzaei Shabbos will be very close to 8 o'clock Seattle time. And we start our class 8 o'clock Seattle time, 11 o'clock New York time. So I have to see, maybe we get one more class in, and maybe, or we'll just push it to 8:30 if that's okay with some
Well,
people.
let me just say one thing to you. It's up to you if you can handle it. Because
Uh,
11
uh,
o'clock. So
it-
just
it-
listen to me for 1 second. 11 o'clock is 11 o'clock, no matter how you cut it. And when we move it, it takes maybe a couple days to a week, and we're used to it. 11 o'clock is 11 o'clock to me in New York. It doesn't matter. We changed the clocks or we didn't change the clocks. It's if you can handle it and be up at this time on Fridays.
That's not a problem. The problem is that I would not want to start the class if it's Shabbos in Seattle for some of the people.
No, I got you. And that's when we have to cut it.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Laila Tov and Shavua Tov. Take care.
Lila, so.
Okay. Bye, Lito.